Hey, everybody, welcome again. We're going to be talking to the team of J-SAS, and today we're going to be talking about how exactly their compliance solution helps an actual end customer. So at the end of the day, it's great, but you want to know what this thing does at the end customer level. So I'm joined by Sase and Ryan, and I'm going to kick it off with Sase, and tell us a bit about the customer, first of all, and what are we going to be seeing
Sure.
today?
For sure, Julian. Thank you for that. What we're going to be doing today is, we said, let's take a case study of how we engage with one potential customer, how we go about the journey. And, the intent here is maybe we can shed some light for MSPs who are embarking on this journey for the first time, what to expect. So, we actually choose this organization because we wanted to do this case study, and also we wanted to make sure that we capture that journey. But before we start, and before I turn it over to Ryan, I thought I would give you an idea of how we approach it, what the company is, the background of that company. So we'll call that company Clinical Health Solutions. They operate in the healthcare space, so they're CHS. And a little bit about that company profile. They're a SaaS, a fast-growing SaaS organization. And their product, their SaaS application, streamline the engagement between healthcare providers and patients. And they also do analytics on the other end to improve those engagements. Now, we chose them. We thought they would be an ideal fit for our product for various reasons. We thought that we suspect they would have like a multi-dimensional compliance requirement. Now, what does I mean? What do I mean by that? By multi-dimensional, I mean, first, they're a SaaS organization. So they have to have some sort of an alignment to a security framework, like a NIST or CIS, the simplest. Second, their trading partner or their business engagement would require them to be like a SOC 2 compliant. And third, because of the nature of their business and the region in which they operate, they would have to have like a HIPAA compliance. So it's a multi-stage stuff. So we invited them. We told them, this is what we think your journey is. Can we meet? They agreed to meet with us. We actually engaged them midstream, where they just completed their SOC 2 Type 1, and they were on the journey to SOC 2 Type 2. So not to give it away, I'll turn it over to Ryan, and he would give you an overview. But what I can say before that is that our suspicion of them being a multi-compliant organization requirement was confirmed. So they confirmed that they're on that journey, and we'll talk through that, how that worked out with Ryan.
Well, Slice, I mean, why don't you pick a hard customer to start with? Let's go for it. I mean, the medical field, if there is such a thing as compliance and regulations, obviously it's in the health industry. So I'm very, very curious to see how this all went. So
For sure.
Ryan, what happened?
All right. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Sase. So when we engaged, CHS had just purchased a subscription to a GRC tool to help them track their audit responsibilities. However, the staff were already overwhelmed with their existing workload. They had a lot of other things already happening and perhaps could not spend as much time on this. They didn't have the expertise to operationalize that solution. And frankly, they didn't have the time to look at any of the policy or control gaps that were identified. So as a result, they were unable to capture the evidence required to support a SOC 2 Type 2 audit. So to do the audit, you need to submit evidence. They were unable to do it themselves. And they also didn't have the time to look at any of those identified deficiencies. So fast forward, the year went on. They allowed their subscription to the GRC solution to lapse because it was very expensive and it wasn't working for them, frankly. And they were no closer to getting a SOC 2 Type 2 audit than they were when they started. This is when we entered the picture. So not to be deterred, they engaged us and asked for some support to get their their SOC 2 Type 2 audit going. Now, this is where we engage them from a bottom-up approach to CAAS. So we were mentioning bottom-up, top-down in one of our previous previous meetings. What I mean by a bottom to top or a bottom-up approach to CAAS is that we offered to collect evidence for them. And the way we did this is by using our CAAS platform, Protect Suite. So we started off by setting up and configuring one of our platform integrators to pull back telemetry data from their cloud environment. We looked at that in a previous video about how it works a little bit. So now we're collecting data. We also took the opportunity to do a mock audit, to do a compliance discovery to identify gaps. So you may remember from the last time we met, it's very easy to do these things. It's just a couple of clicks. An MSP doesn't have to be an expert themselves in compliance in order to operationalize this thing. We purposely made the platform very step-by-step and gave you all the tools that you need to roll this out. So it's no guesswork. It's very straightforward. So anyway, we did a compliance discovery and we found out some gaps, and we identified several inconsistencies. And what I mean by that is they essentially weren't doing what they said they were going to do in the type 1, not in just because they didn't have the time to operationalize what controls they thought they would put in place. So passing a type 2 audit wouldn't have been possible for them at that moment. Now, some of the things that were identified were related to their cloud environment security best practices, policy gaps, access control management gaps, that type of thing. So again, remember, they didn't have time to do this to begin with. They wanted it, but they didn't have time to carry it through. This is where they again asked for our help, and we were able to switch to a top-down approach to CAAS. What do I mean by that? Before we were doing a bottom-up to collect the evidence, now we're doing top-down. We were able to use our SOC 2 Type 2 policy templates and apply it to this company. We're also able to use our libraries to provide them with the necessary controls and populate their risk registry, all from our libraries that we have in Protect Suite. We showed you a bit of this in the last time we met. It's all available to MSPs as soon as they access the application, so it's all available to you, everything that you need. So once we did that, we also set up some more of our connectors to start pulling back user data from their SaaS applications. Why? So they can do recorded privileged access user reviews. Why is the recording important? It's important because you need to have that documentation. It's all about documentation to support that type 2 audit. So fast forward to today. They're still our client as part of our CAAS functions. And I'm happy to report that by the end of the year, they are on track to getting their SOC 2 Type 2 audit completed.
Well, bravo. Look, I mean, it's not easy getting these certifications, right? Compliance for SOC 2 and so on. And you clearly pointed out, it's not for the faint of heart, right? This stuff is can be time consuming, and the folks that's responsible for the day-to-day activities at these companies, compliance is a whole different thing. As a matter of fact, quite honestly, I don't know how people can do compliance internally. It just seems to me that this should be an external solution.
Exactly.
Always, because you do want to have an independent third party looking at it. It's like, yeah, it's great to have your accountant that's internal to your company do your audits. Exactly. It's a little bit better if you have a third party company, do an audit for your company. So so now we've talked about this user case. So obviously, because this is a very complex case, everything under that becomes much easier, right? Yeah. So what are some of the things you want MSPs to know about how they could approach their customers, open the door, and the kind of outcomes they can get like you?
Right. So first and foremost, there's a couple of key takeaways. So what Ryan described it reinforces the point that organizations are realizing that they cannot go this on their own. And they're more inclined now than ever to talk to a service provider. So that's where the first opportunity is. That's where the first in is. The second most important point there is that customer had to get rid of their GRC tool. So it demonstrates clearly what we've been saying. Traditional GRC tools won't cut it in this initiative that you're embarking on. You need a CAAS platform, something that can take you along the way. The third most important point there is that if we had engaged this organization from day one, we would have saved them $100,000 when we did the math. They spent $30K for that year on the tool. They spent $18K on the audit and about quantifying it about $50K on resources. We would have advised them that if you didn't have the need to do type 1 because there's no market pressure, streamline your operations with a platform, a CAAS platform like ours, and get to type 2. So you'd save that initial investment and you now have a real certification rather than a point in time. So what I want, what we've described there is it presents opportunities, revenue opportunities. Ryan talked about policy management. That can be a bundle. We talk about, doing a gap analysis, what we call a compliance discovery, You know, I'm sure MSP can relate to this because back in the day, we put an agent on a probe in your network and we do discovery. So you do a kind of a compliance discovery here to show the gap analysis. So there's opportunity where you can provide services. You know, the other thing is I want to reinforce the point Ryan made, is that it does not have to be difficult. It does not negate you from having to understand what compliance is or what that framework requires you to do. You have to know that. But you know, you can almost learn on the fly, which is the best way to learn actually. And because our product teaches you how to get through a compliance, depending on which one you pick. So those are some key takeaways for them. Don't go this on your own. The opportunity is there, but be aware that there's also risk. You know, not all that glitters is gold. So if you understand how to approach this, have a strong business case, a business strategy, partner with a CAAS platform, it would address some of those pain points and mitigate some of those risks that you may encounter along the way. So that would be my message to MSPs.
Yeah. Well, Sase, you open up another question for me there. It's like, okay, so this company saved a whole bunch of money if they went with you, but how much would something like this roughly cost? I'm not looking for an exact price, but generally, right? What would it cost them to do
It
this
depends
job?
on what you engage them with from the MSP point of view. Because if you're doing like continuous compliance, it can range depending on the size of the organization from 2,000 all the way up to 6,000 a month just for basic compliance. That GRC tool I told you about, just to deploy that tool was 30,000 for that, 30,000 US for that organization. They actually showed me the invoice. So just to get an understanding where the actual traditional GRC is falling behind, presents that opportunity. You can have a recurring revenue stream going if you do CAAS functions, right? It can open the door for tools discussion, you know, because they may not have a certain tool to plug a certain hole. So it creates that, you have to bundle this thing, you know, to figure out where you go, right?
So zooming out of this thing, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we all know now that compliance is not a one-time gig, check the box, right? Because things change in the company. You have different solutions you add, different company people you hire, et cetera, et cetera. Things do change. And therefore, compliance is something that you're constantly, you know, having to be on top of, right? Just talk a little bit about how when you deploy your platform, right? How does it maintain? Like, how does it tell me, like, hey, something is out of whack today that wasn't out of whack, you know, a month ago?
Yeah, I'll take this and then I'll hand it Ryan. But one of the things we do is we focus on the CAAS function. And the key thing here is for you to maintain compliance, like we mentioned before, you have to be doing things in a certain cadence. If you're not doing it, then you can't prove that. So our platform reminds you that you have this job to do. And in most cases, wherever possible, it digitizes that for you. We focus a lot on privileged access management, where we give you visibility across your SaaS application of who has access to what. That's really important. Why? Because we know one of the biggest pain points and one of the biggest risk vector would be your users, followed by your assets, your data. So managing that is important. And our platform reminds you that you have to do it, right? What it does, it collates all that information across your SaaS landscape into a single platform. So it becomes a 20, 30 minutes at most work every quarter, if you were to do it every quarter. So that's one example. Then you have the vulnerability side of things. So it's looking at all those components of the framework and digitizing wherever possible so that it makes it easier for you to do that, and also reminding you that you have to do that.
Right. That was nothing like making sure that, you know, here's, you know, you have this client that you have to keep in compliance, right? It's you got to keep monitoring, you know, to see what's going on. It's also a great way to keep in touch with the customer, you know, like, hey, here's what we did for you this month. And this is why we got to justify, you know, the check we're or the invoice we're sending you to get paid every month, right?
And ongoing,
Ryan,
like you can also do like things like an ongoing security requirement, you know, so that's a recurring revenue stream right there, right? If you're doing it quarterly or monthly, right?
For sure. The holy grail of what MSPs want, recurring revenue. So Ryan, what else could we take away from how end customers can benefit and the outcomes from using your J-SAS platform?
Right. So the key here is certain things and checks and balances need to happen on a cadence, on a regular cadence. So for example, those user access reviews we were talking about, perhaps you stated that you're going to do it every month or every quarter, what the case may be. From an MSP point of view, we provide you with a dashboard that tells you what is coming due and what is past due. So you'll be able to look at your list of customers and know I have a upcoming review of user access coming up soon. So now you know where to focus your time and who you can engage on that regular basis. That allows you to then drill down, and as Sase was mentioning, spend that short amount of time to do your check to see, are my controls still functioning? Let me do my access review and get it done. So you're able to see on a regular basis what work needs to be required to maintain your compliance. So now you have that regular engagement that's dictated by the compliance requirements, and it keeps you focused and engaged with your customer. Then when you drill down, you're able to see more of that compliance dashboard we were looking at before. That gives you the nuts and bolts of, do you have new policies? Do you have new employees? Have your employees done their employee onboarding, their new employee onboarding training, perhaps? And so then you can keep checks on that. So you're showing them that you're maintaining this high level of compliance throughout the year, which they need to then prove their certification at the end of the audit period.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to add, Julian, we talk a lot about privileged access management, but there's a whole new conversation around risk management. And we have risk registries within the product that would help you to that journey. And again, you don't have to know what the risk management framework dictates. You can learn that, because what we've done, we've implemented that risk management framework in our product, and it takes you to that journey and, you know, understanding your risk, mitigating your risk, and understanding your residual risks, applying controls against the risk. So we think we thought through everything that matters for compliance, all those components, and we've baked that into the system. We digitize that for you. So I know we're focusing a lot on privileged access, but it's also controls management, risk.
Sure.
These are things you have to do in a cadence. Like, look at what happened to, you know, CrowdStrike, and then shortly after by the Azure outages. Now organizations need to rethink their risk threshold. You know, we didn't think that an antivirus solution is going to bring us to our knees. Now, should we start now looking at our risk planning differently? Do we have to redo a plan? Do we have, so we allow all that to happen within our platform. So we haven't even addressed risk. So you see this area is growing, and it's all encompassing.
Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, right, these compliance and regulation stuff that we're all having to deal with was developed because they want everybody to have a better cybersecurity posture. So that ultimately reduces the cyber breaches, right? So we can all live happily ever after, right?
Exactly.
So these are not just regulations because we don't want you to do something. We want to make your life more difficult. It's like cybersecurity is not easy, right? And you need something to look over it to ensure that you're doing the right things, making sure you didn't miss anything, make sure the gaps are all, you know, covered. So this stuff is not just something that you need to check a box to get insurance or so you don't get sued or things like this. It's really about making sure your cybersecurity posture, your hygiene is really top notch. The other thing, though, that is going to save you at the end of the day is the ability to prove that you did what you said that you did. So you can't just say anymore, hey, I got that, you know, we did it. And then if something happens, you try to, you know, shuffle things around, you know, you can't. You got to be able to prove. So just spend a little bit of time on what exactly, let's say they get audited for real, and they have to show that they're doing the right stuff or have done the right stuff, right? What does your platform do to help them to, you know, I would say pass the audit? What does it do?
Well, first they can start with, along the way, we'll be doing mock audits. So let's say we do that on a quarterly basis. So they can prove to whomever is going to be auditing them that, listen, I'm aligned to CIS. Let's pick a simple framework. CIS has different levels. Let's say the basic one. I'm aligned to this CIS controls, and this is how we've operationalized along the way. So they can now provide, because we're collecting evidence, they can provide proof that, hey, my employees did security awareness training. Let's suppose you had a breach and it's happened through a phishing attack. Now you need to show that did you do due diligence around educating your staff around this type of vulnerability. So you can show historically over the year where those training was going because we have those reports. Endpoint protection, did you have that in place? Well, yes, here's what we have in place, and it's been running along the way because we have a controls that say that we are going to have endpoint protection. We've been monitoring those controls every quarter, or they're automated. And here's a history, here's the evidence. So every single thing that they may claim that we aren't doing or they want us to prove we're doing, we have it there because we have a long list of evidence. We call it evidence request list, which coincide with the framework that you're subscribing to. So we'll demonstrate, hey, first you make the statement, you're complying to CIS or NIST or SOC 2, and here's the evidence because we have mock audits going every quarter, for example.
Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, right, when something hits the fan and, a problem happens, you want to have some proof, some backup, because, there may be insurance involved, there may be legal issues involved, somebody might get sued, whatever that bad outcomes are, right?
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, you can't go up and just say, hey, we did it, right, without showing how you did it, that you did it, and et cetera, et cetera. So the proof is always, I guess, in the pudding. You've got to make sure that you have that report and that data, that history, right, that you can generate and show, here is what we did. And with that evidence, let's say, you're going to have much easier time in getting paid from insurance companies. It's going to be much more difficult for a legal lawsuit to win against you. And I think it's a good comfort thing because now there is a way for you to keep yourself in check, right? Your cybersecurity posture becomes better. And at the end of the day, I guess the ultimate gig is that if you did this right and you patch those holes and those gaps before it becomes, a problem or being breached, then you might not even get breached, which is the end game. That's what you want.
And that's the whole point. Yeah, that's the whole point of a framework. While people may look at it as a check mark or as a requirement for doing businesses, if you really follow it, it really does ensure that you're protecting yourself. You're looking at your threat vectors, you're looking at your exposure and making sure you have good hygiene, right? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Worth mentioning that, as a service provider or a security provider, you yourself must show that you are secure. So how can you do that? By showing that you are compliant against some framework, and then you can use the same application to show your proof, to show your evidence. So you can pass your audits and you can use that same tool to pass on to your customers to bring them to that same level of high standard compliance.
That's such a great point. Thanks for reminding me about this because the MSP community, they need to protect themselves. What's that thing with the shoemaker? The shoemaker has no shoes, something like this. But, MSPs, look, compliance is here, right? You got to be your own self. You got to go through the process yourself. And by so doing, you're going to learn how to do this, right? And I will just end with one thing. It's not something where you're just going to leave these MSPs on their own to figure this stuff, right? So you guys are going to support them to help them get through the process, learn, get up to speed. And you're always there with them because you're offering a SaaS platform, correct?
Exactly. We'll be there all the step of the way to help them through that journey. Especially if they're starting out now. I always focus. We always say things like security by design, but you must have your business strategy right out of the gate. So helping them through that journey, we will be definitely supporting them through that journey.
Mission critical.
Exactly.
Anything else you want to say? Ryan, your last word, and then I'll go to Sase.
Compliance has become much more in the public eye recently, and it's very multifaceted. So getting yourself on board now is a great opportunity. It presents a great opportunity for MSPs. You don't need to be an expert yourself to sell it and to roll it out to your customers. Our application walks you through it. So don't be worried about what you don't know yet. The application will take you through that journey. So you'll be able to roll this out. We've provided you with all the resources you need, and we'll help you get started with your customers so you do it right from the start.
Good stuff. Sase, any last words?
Yeah. So in addition to the 3 points I talked about, it's important for MSPs to also realize that doing CAAS can be a risk mitigation strategy to revenue, because a CAAS vendor can take away business from MSPs. Because once they start a conversation about business requirement, tools become a secondary conversation, and then the customer can say, well, am I paying a CAAS vendor and MSP? Which is more important to me? So the competition becomes stiffer. So pay attention to that vector, that risk vector for your organization, potential loss of revenue as well as you go about this. But again, I want to emphasize, don't do this on your own. Pick a CAAS platform and we can help them. They can check us out at j-sas.com and we will give them a demo of our product.
Good stuff. So, my takeaway and 2 cents on this is that compliance as a service is an incredible opportunity for the channel, and also incredibly important in the fight against cybercrime. So these things are not just coming out of thin air just for fun. All right, nobody's saying let's go compliance for fun. All right, and I think that if I was an MSP and I wanted to ensure I was as sticky as possible with my client, right, I'd want to make sure I hold that component under my umbrella. I'd want to have the compliance issues, so I know what's happening with everybody in the company. I'm helping this client to become compliant, stay compliant, make sure if there's a problem, the evidence is there so they can protect themselves and get paid for insurance if the worst case scenario happened, or defend themselves if they're getting audited, and reduce fines and all sorts of things that we don't even know yet that's coming down the pipeline. So get on the compliance as a service bandwagon immediately, because the faster you do, the better you're going to be able to do this and deliver the service to your clients. All right, guys, thank you again. And we're going to see you, by the way, if you want to see these folks and the products, in action. They're going to also be at our West event on October 21, 22, depending on when you watch this video. But come out West if you want and meet the team and see exactly what this is about.
Looking forward to that.
Sase and Ryan, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Great
Cheers.
stuff.
Invitation.